Okay, so I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and I was listening to this girl who is graduated now, but she played softball at the University of Alabama. And if you don't know anything about college softball, Alabama is usually one of the contenders that usually wins or is in the College World Series every single year. All right, so Alabama's really good at softball. And so I was listening to her talk about her career at Alabama, and she, for 4 years there, was kind of a role player. She was kind of a bench player. And she talked about how for the first 2 years of her career at Alabama, she talked about how there were a couple, she played catcher, and there were a couple of girls who were older than she was on the team. And so, you know, it's kind of understandable that she wasn't getting much playing time. These people who played the same position as her had been there longer, and so they ended up graduating, and so she was a junior, and she's like, okay, like, I'm finally going to get my shot now. I'm finally going to get my shot. And she talked about how the summer going into that season, so the off season going into that season, her coach calls and says that they're bringing in a transfer. And so here she is preparing, finally thinking that she's getting ready to have her opportunity. It's finally going to be her time to start. It's finally going to be her chance. And then she finds out they're bringing in this transfer. And this transfer ends up playing catcher as well. And this transfer just ends up being like an unbelievable player. So this girl kind of has her opportunity kind of taken away from her. And so she never ends up really getting to play for Alabama. You know, still, she's really good. She's on this national champion softball team. But she never ended up being a starter. She just was a role player and kind of a bench player for her entire 4 years there. And it was really interesting getting to hear her talk about her career. And now she's a lawyer in Washington, D.C., and she brought up this really interesting story about how she got her job in D.C. and how she became a lawyer. She's like, yeah, like, you know, I went out to lunch with this guy who worked at a law firm in Washington, D.C., and he Googled me before we went out to lunch. And when he Googled me, he saw that there were a couple articles that were written about me from my time at Alabama that talked about how I was a hard worker and how I was a really good teammate and how I kind of lost my opportunity to be a starter, but that didn't affect the kind of teammate that I was. And I thought it was really, really interesting because I think this happens all the time, and we're not always aware of it. People are always watching you. People are always watching you. And so my question for you this morning, and the question I want you to think about this morning, we're kind of piggybacking off of this assembly from Joshua last week, and on Tuesday I talked about you taking yourself seriously and you considering yourself as a brand or a company, and I asked you if your dream opportunity knocked on the door, would you be ready? And I'm going to follow that up with a follow-up question this morning that asks you if your dream opportunity or your dream boss took a look at your social media account, what would they say? What would they say? Because I think so often, like I said, we're like this girl who played at Alabama. There's people who are watching us all the time. And, you know, eventually 4 or 5 years from now, you're gonna go apply for your dream opportunity, and they're going to Google you. So what's going to pop up? And I really wish that this was something that I would have understood when I was your age. I really wish I would have understood this when I was your age. Because I feel like I would have had a lot of different opportunities in my life. And like most people who are your age, I was posting dumb stuff on social media. And so, again, I'm asking you, if somebody Googled you right now, like, what would pop up? Would you be proud of what popped up? And you guys got to meet Joshua last week. Joshua talks about this story that is kind of similar. He when he was first getting started, he was actually speaking at the University of Illinois. This is before I knew him, about 4 years ago. So this is right before I got to meet Joshua. Joshua was speaking at the University of Illinois. And he tells this story about how he was going to be speaking to the athletes at the U of I that night. And during the day, he loves to play golf, so he went out to the golf course and he was hitting balls on the driving range. And sure enough, like the University of Illinois golf team shows up. And Joshua talks about, he's like, yeah, I was going to walk over, I was going to introduce myself, I was going to start sharing some things with them. I work with the top golf coaches in the country. And, I was going to walk over and just start to build a relationship with these guys and just walk over and be like, hey, these are some of the tools that I'm teaching, some of the top golf professionals in the world, and I just want to share these with you. And he talks about how he was getting ready to walk over there and talk to these guys on the golf team, and he heard the conversation that they were having. And they were talking about, where they were going to go party that night and how many girls they were talking to, and so Joshua was like, I'm not going to waste my time talking to them. And so it's I think about that, and now I think about where Joshua is at 4 years later, and if those guys would have been able to connect with Joshua, where those guys could be in their lives right now. They could be playing professional golf potentially, if they would have been able to learn some of the tools and mental techniques that Joshua teaches. And I'm like, man, they lost out on a really big opportunity. And so again, it's I think that happens to us all the time. People are watching you all the time. And I think so often we miss out on a lot of opportunities in our lives because we're not aware of who's watching. And so, I'm not trying to sit up here and tell you what you can and can't post on social media, but again, I would ask you, if your dream boss Googled you right now, would you be happy with what they see? You guys are in such a unique spot in your lives because you can put out a thought in how long does it take? 2 seconds to put something on Twitter or Facebook or Snapchat, and that stuff does not go away. And so you've got to start thinking about you guys are building your resumes right now. You guys are building your resumes right now, and you have to start thinking about is what I'm putting on social media, is what people are seeing from me, what I want them to see from me. All right? That's all I got for you guys this morning. All right? Remember, it's you versus you. It's you incorporated. You got to start taking yourself seriously. All right? Go win the day.